My name is Tessa Morgan. I'm 34, a project manager at a mid-sized tech company, and I've spent years living like a human spreadsheet. Every coffee logged, every bill timed, every paycheck sliced into rent, loans, and a thin sliver called hope. Last month, hope finally bought me a house. I told no one. Not my parents, not my brother Evan. I wanted one clean thing that belonged only to me. Peace lasted exactly 2 weeks. On a quiet Friday, I turned onto my street and saw a white van idling at my curb. The logo on the door read, Ace Lock and Key. Evan's SUV sat behind it. My stomach tightened. My porch light threw a cone across the front door, where a man crouched with tools. I set my grocery bag on the step and pushed the door inward. The latch was already sprung. Inside smelled of oil. Shapes moved through my living room. My mother smoothing a throw, my father hanging his jacket on my chair, Evan measuring the guest room doorway while his kids bounded over my rug. Cold slid through me. Stop! The locksmith froze. My family didn't. Sweetheart, my mother said without looking at me, we didn't expect you home yet. I kept my eyes on the man with the tools. Who authorized you to open my door? He swallowed. Ma'am, they said they had permission. The key they brought wouldn't turn. Because she changed the lock. My mother cut in, finally turning, smiling. We copied your keys last week when I visited and, well, someone decided to be difficult, so we brought a professional. No harm done. We copied your keys. When that didn't work, we dragged a locksmith. And while I was gone, they entered with Evan's whole family as if the deed had our last name on it. A jar tipped and cracked behind me. One of the twins bounced on my armchair, giggling. Evan didn't glance up. Sis, good timing. If we slide the bunk bed along this wall, the boys can share, and Ellie gets the room with the bay window. Perfect. You don't need 3 bedrooms by yourself. This is my house, I said. Not a group project. Mine. My father finally spoke, brows lifting like a judge bored by a plea. Family resources are meant to be used efficiently, Tessa. Your brother has 3 children. You're 1 adult. Do the math. I stepped in, past the locksmith's spilled picks. Efficiency doesn't trump consent. Evan snorted. Come on. You know Mom only copied the keys so we could help get things set up. You really want all this space to sit empty while the kids are stacked like firewood at our place? Help, I thought. That old word they loved. Help meant my money, my time, my peace translated into their comfort. I looked at the locksmith. Pack up, please. You're done here. He nodded with relief, coiling his tools. My mother's expression flattened. Tessa, don't start. We already worked out a schedule. We'll move in Sunday. You can keep the small bedroom for your office. We'll use the primary. Evan's back gives him trouble, and the garage is better for his truck if you park on the street. I stared at her. You had a key copied without asking. When it didn't fit anymore, you brought a locksmith. You walked into my home with Evan's entire family and started dividing rooms. It's called planning, my father said. Something you claim to value. A match struck in my chest. Here's my plan. You have 2 minutes to leave or I call the police. My mother laughed, brittle. You wouldn't dare embarrass us in front of the neighbors. 1 minute, 50 seconds, I said, pulling out my phone with a steady hand I barely recognized. Evan's wife began gathering backpacks and cups. The kids whined, confused. Evan rolled the tape measure closed with a snap, but still tried for charm. Tess, be reasonable. This will look bad for you. People will talk. They already talk, I said. Let them talk about boundaries for once. Silence settled. Then movement. My father's jacket scraped off the chair. My mother's purse snapped shut. The twins shuffled. The locksmith slipped by me with a murmured, sorry. Evan shouldered past, eyes hard. At the threshold, my mother paused, pasted on a smile for the street, and slammed the door so hard the windows thrummed. I slid the deadbolt and touched the gouged metal around the keyway. The scratches were raw, silver wounds in new brass, small, pretty, if you didn't know what they meant. The old script tried to climb my throat, be nice, be generous, be grateful for whatever you're allowed to keep. Number, My phone lit up before I could pick up the groceries, my father's name flashing. I let it ring. In the hallway mirror, my face looked like someone I had been waiting to meet, tired but sharpened. In the kitchen, I set the cracked jar in the sink and rinsed red from my fingers. The water ran clear. It would again. I went back to the door and laid my palm against it, the wood still humming from the slam. "This is my house," I said. Quieter now. To the room, to myself, to every version of me who had handed over her keys to keep the peace. And this is where it stops. I kept my hand on the door a moment longer, feeling the wood cool beneath my palm, then walked into the house that was supposed to mean peace. Cushions were crooked, crumbs glittered. I set the groceries on the counter and faced the frames along the hallway shelf, a small museum reminding me this was earned. The first frame shows me at 19 after a double shift at the campus cafe. A candle leans in a grocery cake, frosting soft because I carried it home on the bus. I remember pressing the buzzer and my father's voice through the intercom. Rent first, then dessert. I counted bills into his hand before we cut the cake. My mother snapped the picture, then boxed the leftovers so Evan could have some later. The next frame is Evan at 18 under a balloon arch, confetti falling, a 5-tier cake throwing light. A banner with his name in gold fills the wall. My mother wraps his shoulders, her other arm extended toward the cake like a reveal. I'm in the shot too, off to the side, still in my cafe apron. When I moved home for sophomore year to save money, my parents called it real-world training. I paid rent each month into an envelope on the mantel. Utilities were character building. Groceries were practice. I told myself families make different deals. Some give. Ours believed in lessons. Meanwhile, Evan's tuition, car, and gas card arrived with bows. I kept my head down and my planner full. Beneath the frames sits a thin ledger notebook I used to track every hour I worked and every payment I made. Ink grooves deepen where I press too hard, trying to prove something even to paper. I flip it open, scanning entries. Tips, rent, bus pass, interest, one pair of shoes because the soles had split. My handwriting steadies by spring when I reached a number I labeled breathing. I had grown used to being the supporting shadow, but now it's different. The thought lands like a weight on still water. I close the ledger and notice the hook by the entry table where I keep my new keyring. It holds 2 keys and a small fob for the door camera. My glance drifts to another hook, empty, the one I used to reserve a spare in case of family emergencies. I almost placed a copy there the afternoon my mother visited to drop off a housewarming candle. It was a brief visit, 20 minutes at most. She admired the bay window, padded cushions, then asked to use the bathroom, leaving her purse on the console. I remember a tiny jingle when the purse brushed the bowl of change, the way she paused by the hall before stepping away. I thought nothing of it, eager to show her the herb starters by the sink and the drawer organizers I'd saved for. When she hugged me goodbye, she pressed the candle into my hands and smiled. The memory now has edges I didn't see. The purse, the jingle, her eyes flicking toward the door. Tonight she said it plain. They copied my keys. As if access to my life were a favor, a teaspoon of sugar borrowed and forgotten. I slide my real keys into my pocket and walk back to the living room. The toys are gone, but dents remain. I smooth them with my hand and feel the ache in my shoulders ease with the small mercy of setting one thing right. The room exhales a little. So do I. In the kitchen, I wash sticky rings left by cups that weren't mine. The sponge squeaks, water beads along the sink and gathers into a thin line before sliding away. I line my groceries again. Eggs, basil, bread, proof of a life built one honest purchase at a time. I open the back door to let in night air and the faint scent of rosemary from the starter bed outside. I am not a ledger to be balanced against someone else's comfort. I am not an emergency, drawer labeled for convenient use. I am the one who decides who turns a key here, and I intend to remember that. 20 minutes after I shut the door behind them, my phone lit up with my father's name. I almost let it ring into silence, but the vibration seemed to pulse through the floor, dragging me to answer. The moment I pressed the screen, his voice thundered through the line. "Tessa, what the hell are you doing? Your mother is in tears. You're tearing this family apart with your selfishness." I held the phone away from my ear slightly, listening not to his words, but to the rhythm of them. It was the same cadence I'd heard my whole life. Accusation first, then guilt, then the moral lecture designed to corral me back into line. He didn't even pause for me to respond. "You think being independent means shutting the door on the people who raised you? Real Americans, real families, they know how to sacrifice for each other. That's what holds us together. And you," his breath hissed, "you're acting like you were born into some stranger's house instead of ours." Sacrifice. That word had been burned into me for decades, used like a lever to pry open my resolve whenever I tried to hold something back for myself. Rent during college was sacrifice. Buying groceries while Evan received an allowance was sacrifice. Skipping vacations so he could have spring break in Florida was sacrifice. Now he was dressing it up in patriotism. Real Americans sacrifice for their siblings. I stared at the scratches carved into the brass around my lock, silvery grooves catching the light. That sound, metal grinding, was louder in my mind than my father's voice. I thought, I can't even hear him anymore. I only hear the lock and what it means. "Dad," I said finally, my voice low, "you need to stop calling me until you can respect that this is my home." But he kept going, as though I hadn't spoken. "You've always understood before. Every time Evan needed something, you stepped up. That's what family is. That's what makes you decent. Do you really want the neighborhood knowing you turned away your own blood?" He wanted me to picture whispers at church, co-workers' raised eyebrows, neighbors shaking their heads, the same chorus they had used to keep me in place. But for once, the picture didn't sting. It looked strangely hollow, like a stage set without actors. I cut the call and set the phone face down on the counter. The quiet that followed was almost holy. I picked up a rag and began wiping the scarred lock, slow circles against the cold surface. My father's voice no longer echoed. All I heard was the click in my head when the deadbolt slid shut earlier, a sound that felt like safety. The scratches would remain, a mark of intrusion, but they also marked a line crossed. The phone buzzed again. I didn't lift it. A second later, the familiar chime of a group message came through. Against my better judgment, I turned the screen over. It was a text thread I hadn't known I was included in, my father, my mother, and Evan. My mother had written, "Don't worry about Tessa's tantrum. She'll give in once you're settled. She always does. She always does." 3 words that collapsed years of my life into a single phrase. Every unpaid bill I covered, every chore I absorbed, every hand-me-down I wore without complaint. They weren't sacrifices, they were expectations. Carved into my identity so deeply, my own mother assumed I would never stop. This time, something inside me broke clean instead of bending. I deleted myself from the thread and placed the phone back down. My chest tightened, but not from fear, more from clarity. If they saw me as someone who always does, then it was my job to prove once and for all that I don't anymore. I folded the rag and placed it on the counter, then stood in the middle of my living room. The room was quiet, almost waiting. I thought of the words I would need in the days ahead. Boundaries, documentation, resolve. But for tonight, I let silence settle, like fresh paint on walls no one else had the right to touch. And in that silence, I promised myself, the next time they tried to force me back into the old script, they would discover it had already been rewritten. Morning light sneaks under the blinds as I stand at the counter, grinding beans by habit, trying to steady my thoughts with the ritual of a coffee. The house hums, the fridge, a faint tick from the vent. I pour hot water and decide to avoid my phone. The screen still lights on its own. A banner from a neighborhood group, then a ping from my cousin, then, uninvited, a red badge from the app I promised to ignore. My thumb betrays me. I open it, ready to swipe everything away. At the top sits my sister-in-law's name. She tagged me. The photo loads slowly, pixel by pixel. 3 smiling kids squeezed together on a twin mattress beneath paper stars. The caption reads, "Kids will have their own rooms soon. In Tessa's house." A heart. My name highlighted in blue. I don't move. I scroll to the date. 3 weeks ago. My closing appointment was scheduled 10 days later. I had told no one, not even my closest friend, because secrecy felt like the only way to breathe. 3 weeks before I signed the closing papers. 2 weeks before anyone besides the title officer and my lender knew the cottage existed. The room tilts just enough to push my balance. Comments bloom below the photo. "Which room is Ellie getting?" someone asks. "The blue one with the window seat," my sister-in-law replies, like a realtor on a tour. "The boys will share across the hall. We'll keep the smaller room set aside so Tessa has a place to work when she visits." Another person adds, "Such a blessing." A third, "Family is everything." My hand loosens. The mug slips, bounces once on the tile, shatters. Hot coffee splashes across my bare foot, a sudden brand that yanks me into the present. I gasp, crank the faucet, and let cold water rush over the burn until the sting recedes. A single shard clings to my skin before the stream lifts it away. I set paper towels over the pool. The phone lies face up on the counter, still open to the thread. More comments trickle in. Congratulations, prayers, a neighbor offering bunk beds. Only one message cuts through from someone I barely know. "Did Tessa say yes?" No one answers her. I read the caption again. "My house, named like a prize already claimed." They mapped out bedrooms before I had a key in my pocket. They planned the colors, the toys, the sleepovers, and when the copied key failed, they hauled a locksmith to defeat the new lock. This wasn't an impulsive act. It was a plan. Clarity spreads through me, cleaner than anger. I tap the dots, archive the notification, and take screenshots anyway, labeling each with the timestamp. Evidence. Not for a courtroom, not yet. For me. For the next time someone tries to tell me I misread their intentions. I step around the ceramic and fetch the broom. Glass whispers as it moves across the floor. The house smells like roast and rain. I think about all the things I accepted because yes felt safer than being called ungrateful. Rent envelopes on the mantel. Gas cards handed to Evan like party favors. My mother saying, "It's only for a little while the little whiles stretched into years. I collect the shards into the dustpan, each piece a sliver of the morning I thought I'd have. Instead, I'm cataloging the moment I learned they wrote my future without asking if I wanted to live in it. I rinse the dustpan, wipe the tile, and feel the ache in my foot fade. Outside, a delivery truck sighs and moves on. I dry my hands and pick up the phone again, not to answer anyone, but to open the calendar and circle the date of the post in red. It's a small ritual, a private underline, a promise that I won't be convinced this didn't happen, that I won't be laughed back into silence. I close the app. The kitchen is quiet again. Steam curls from the kettle, an invitation to start over, but I leave it. I want to remember the shape of this moment. The burn, the shard, the caption, the plan. My phone pinged at dusk. A text from my father. "Dinner tonight, 7, your mother's pot roast." I stared at the screen, thought of that caption, and went anyway. I needed to hear them say it out loud, to file the sound with the facts for later. Their house smelled like rosemary and polish. The dining room looked staged like a tribunal. Good china, 3 chairs on one side for my parents and Evan, 1 empty seat facing them. I took it. My mother's smile was tied into a knot. The chandelier glittered above the table, throwing small halos onto the plates, as if blessing a verdict already written. I could feel the old training in my muscles. Nod, agree, volunteer. But it stayed coiled, refusing to perform. Somewhere a clock ticked, measuring the distance between their plan and my consent to night forever. "We're glad you came," she said, smoothing a wrinkle that wasn't there. My father slid a manila folder toward me with 2 fingers, the old rent collection gesture. "We've found a solution. We already spoke with the bank." Inside were printouts of 5-bedroom houses near the boys' school. Broad lawns, twin garages, annotations in my mother's looping hand. Great playroom, sunny loft. Ellie's room. Blue. Tabs flagged mortgage calculators and insurance estimates. A sticky note labeled, "A bonus room, perfect for bunk beds." "We can transfer your loan," my father said, tapping numbers. "Your payment ticks up a little, but with what we contribute, it's manageable. You'll keep a small office." Evan leaned back, easy as an owner. "About the garage, the left bay fits my truck. The right side's tight." "You contacted my bank," I said. "Just preliminary," my mother answered. "We're trying to make this work for everyone. Family first." I aligned the folder with the placemat. I didn't authorize any inquiry. Evan shrugged. "Don't make this harder. You're single. We're cramped. It's simple math." She mistook my silence for consent and produced a second folder. "We also spoke with Robert at your office. He said your hours could be flexible during the move. Isn't that considerate?" A clean click went through me. "You called my boss." "Of course," my father said. "Someone had to coordinate logistics. Your sister-in-law can't do everything." "First big load is next Saturday," Evan added. "I'll borrow a trailer." My chair scraped as I stood. The sound cut the room. I wasn't hot with fury. I was cold with clarity. I placed my hands flat so I wouldn't clench. The chandelier hummed faintly, like my deadbolt after the slam. "You copied my keys," I said quietly. "When that failed, you brought a locksmith. You entered my house and assigned rooms. You spoke to my bank. Now you've negotiated my time with my boss." "You're overreacting," my mother said. "We're offering a larger home, better resale value. Think of the children." "I am," I said. "I'm thinking what they learn if you teach them that other people's boundaries are optional." My father's jaw ticked. "You'll embarrass us. People will wonder why you wouldn't help your own family." "Let them wonder," I replied. "Let them talk about consent." Evan leaned in, lowering his voice. "This will be rougher if you fight us." I straightened, gathered the folders, and handed them back. "Watch me not help." For a heartbeat, no one moved. My mother hovered over the china. My father released a long, disappointed sigh. Evan's mouth twitched, then settled into a smirk. I took out my phone, opened notes, and entered the date, attendees, and phrases, bank, garage, flexible hours, because memory is slippery and they are experts at rewriting. I put the phone away and pushed back my chair. "Sit down," my father said. "No," I answered. At the foyer, my mother called, "Tessa, think how this will look." "It will look like me keeping what I paid for," I said. I stepped into the night, cool air on my face. Their voices rose and braided behind me, familiar as weather I no longer had to stand in. I started the car and drove toward a house that was still mine. Ahead, I pictured my key turning cleanly, catching only where I wanted it to, opening to quiet I owned. The night after the dinner ambush, the town began to hum. Faces turned toward me at the grocery store, then away. Whispered threads floated across the neighborhood page, pretending concern and landing like stones. "Does anyone have extra twin sheets for Evan's boys?" one post asked. Their aunt isn't ready to welcome them yet. Praying hands lined up beneath it. By Tuesday, a woman from the local guild stopped me in the pharmacy aisle, her cart stacked with plastic tablecloths. "Sweetheart, I know you're busy," she said, leaning in, "but children grow so fast. Space matters. Bless your heart if you find it in you to help." Velvet over a blade. I thanked her, turned the corner, and stood by cough drops and thermometers until my pulse eased. That evening, Mrs. Talbot from 2 doors down appeared at my mailbox with a casserole and a smile like a camera flash. "Just spreading love," she sang. "Your mother told us you're struggling with the transition. We're all family here." She tapped the dish. "You'll do the right thing." I set it on my counter, still warm, still heavy. I didn't touch it. On Wednesday, a text from my Sunday school teacher landed without punctuation. "Heard about the situation. A real Christian doesn't refuse her own blood." I typed 3 replies, deleted them, and set the phone face down. When I lifted it again, messages had stacked from numbers I barely knew, verses clipped out of context, advice written like verdicts, and a photo of my living room lifted from my mother's page. My sofa, my lamp, my curtains, captioned, "So much room for grace." After dark, someone slid a flyer under my door. "Family first," in block letters over a cartoon house crammed with children. I picked it up, breathed once, and dropped it into recycling. Later, a car idled long enough for me to look through the peephole. Its headlights filled the steps like a stage where I owed a performance. It drove off when I didn't open the door. Finally. The next afternoon, the doorbell rang. The camera showed Pastor Williams on the mat, Bible tucked under one arm. I opened the door but left the chain latched. He offered a smile I'd known since I was 9. "Tessa," he said, "may I come in for a moment? Your parents are worried. The congregation is too." "I can talk here," I answered. He nodded, glancing past me into the entryway. "No one wants conflict. Your family's been asking for prayer. Perhaps there's a path that honors everyone. Could you consider a temporary arrangement, just until Evan gets through this season?" He lifted the Bible slightly, as if the book itself endorsed his suggestion. My fingers found the cool metal of the chain. "Pastor, I appreciate your concern, but this is my home. I won't be hosting conversations about my boundaries inside it." His eyes softened, then tightened. "People will misunderstand your quiet, Tessa. Silence leaves room for rumors." "Then let them," I said. "I used to think God would see the truth. Now I know I have to document it myself." He blinked. "Document? I'm done debating feelings. From now on, I'm keeping records." A pause opened between us, filled with the small sounds of the street. A truck downshifting, a dog tag jingling, a wind chime tapping a patient rhythm. He exhaled. "I'll pray for your heart to soften." "And I'll pray for clarity," I replied, and closed the door with the chain still set. Inside, the house felt steadier, as if it had settled on its foundation. I walked the perimeter the way Tara, my realtor, had shown me on inspection day, checking windows, touching the bolts, listening to the way each latch answered. At the table, the casserole sat where I'd left it, a monument to expectation. I set a sticky note on the foil. Date received, from whom, and the phrase she'd used. "You'll do the right thing. I didn't remove the note." My inbox pinged. An email from the women's group asking for gently used bunk beds for a family in transition. My mother's address was Sian Sednig. I dragged the message to a folder I named with a single word: evidence. The house quieted as twilight thinned. I made tea, wrote down the times the car had idled, the flyer, the visit, the phrases people kept repeating: seed and record. Not to wage war, I told myself, but to hold the line without shouting. Quiet doesn't have to mean invisible. Sometimes it means visible on paper. When I finished the list, I stood at the door again, hand over the lock, and listened for the sound that had guided me since the night they pushed in. The clean slide of a bolt that answers only to me. The binder was only a week old when I found my own face on a fundraiser. It happened late at night, scrolling through emails. A subject line read, "Help Evan's kids find a home." Curiosity dragged my finger across the screen. The link opened a GoFundMe page with my photograph, cropped from a family barbecue 3 summers ago, plastered beside a photo of Evan's children huddled on a couch. The caption screamed, "These children are being denied bedrooms by their selfish aunt. Every child deserves a home. Please help us." Underneath, my mother had written, paragraphs in her polished Sunday voice, about sacrifice, about my supposed greed, about how Tessa lives alone in a large house while these innocent kids suffer. Donation bars pulsed with early contributions. Names I recognized from church and high school already lined the list. $10, $50, even $100. My stomach dropped. I took screenshots of every inch, the headline, the caption, the photo, the donors. Then I reported the page for unauthorized image use, citing privacy violation. A message confirmed they'd review it, but I knew nothing online ever truly disappears. The damage had already been seeded. The next morning, I walked into the office carrying my binder. I kept it visible on my desk, like armor. Colleagues glanced at me with a mixture of sympathy and discomfort, whispers trailing. I kept my eyes steady on my monitor. By noon, a commotion stirred in the lobby. Marcy appeared, pale. "Your parents are here," she whispered. "They said it's an emergency." I pushed back my chair slowly. "What kind of emergency?" "They told reception your brother's been in an accident. They said you have to come immediately." For half a second, the old instinct to panic tugged at me. I reached for my phone under the desk. A new text from Evan glowed. A complaint about his son's soccer schedule. Time-stamped 2 minutes ago. No accident. Just another lie wrapped in urgency. I stood, squared my shoulders, and walked toward the lobby. The scene felt theatrical. My mother dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue, my father pacing, voice raised so the entire front desk could hear. "Our son is in the hospital," he barked. "We need our daughter right now." Reception staff looked rattled, caught between protocol and pity. I stepped forward. "Evan is fine," I said, loud enough for the room. "I just got a message from him." My father spun, color high in his cheeks. "Don't contradict us in public." "In public is exactly where this belongs," I answered. "You've lied to reception, disrupted my workplace, and used emergency as a weapon. This ends here." My mother's face shifted from tears to indignation. "We're your family. We can't be turned away." "My workplace has security for a reason," I said, turning to the guard behind the desk. "Please remove them." A hush fell as the guard approached. My father puffed up, ready to argue, but my boss appeared instead, composed, her heels clicking against the tile. She looked at me first. "Tessa, are you safe?" "Yes," I said, steady. "They are not here for my safety. They're here to manipulate me." She nodded once, then faced my parents. "This is unacceptable. You have no right to harass our employee or interfere with her work. Security will escort you out. If you return under false pretenses again, we'll involve law enforcement." The guard gestured toward the exit. My father tried to protest, but his words faltered against the weight of the room's silence. My mother clutched her purse, glaring at me as though betrayal dripped from my skin. They shuffled toward the door, their performance unraveling into muttered threats. When the glass doors closed behind them, the lobby exhaled. I realized I had been holding my breath, shoulders tense. My boss touched my arm lightly. "Take the afternoon if you need it," she said. I shook my head. I'd rather stay. This is my ground." Back at my desk, I opened the binder and added a new section. Incident reports. I wrote in clean bullet points. Date, location, false claim of accident, witnesses, reception, security, supervisor. Outcome, escorted from premises. Evidence, text from Evan at same time. I printed a copy of the text, slid it into the sleeve, and closed the cover with the same satisfying clap. Minutes later, a confirmation email arrived from GoFundMe. The campaign had been removed for violation. Relief washed through me, brief and bittersweet. The page was gone, but the story they wanted to tell, selfish aunt versus innocent children, was already loose, mutating in whispers. Still, something had shifted. For the first time, their performance collapsed in front of others, not just me. The reversal of power was real. My boss, my coworkers, even security stood with me instead of against me. The air felt lighter. I packed the binder carefully into my bag before heading home. In the elevator, Marcy slipped in beside me, holding another loaf wrapped in brown paper. "Round 2, she said softly. "You looked like you needed it." This time, I didn't just nod. I smiled, genuine and full, and thought, maybe they've trained me to expect surrender. But today proved I could train myself to expect something else entirely. The GoFundMe takedown gave me one evening of stillness. By the next morning, the next assault arrived in my inbox. The subject line from my homeowners association read, "Notice of violation, commercial activity." My pulse jumped as I opened the email. The letter accused me of running an unlicensed business out of my home. Neighbors, it claimed, had reported unusual traffic and suspicious deliveries. They warned of fines if I failed to cease operations immediately. I sat at my table, the binder open, pen poised. I logged the time, then read the letter again, slower. The language was too formal, too practiced to have come from my actual neighbors. The signature at the bottom was genuine, but the source of the complaint wasn't. Someone had planted it. I called the HOA office directly. The administrator, bored and brisk, told me the complaint was filed by a relative who expressed concern that your house was being used for improper business purposes. I didn't need her to say the name. I could hear my mother's cadence in the phrasing. I hung up, added the email to the binder, and thought, they aren't just trying to guilt me anymore. They're trying to soil my record, to mark me as unstable. That afternoon, the phone rang again, this time from the bank. The representative explained gently that they had received a request to change the mailing address on my mortgage account. It was submitted yesterday, she said. We flagged it because the handwriting on the authorization form didn't match your signature on file. My chest tightened. Where did the form come from? Your parents' home address? She said after a pause. We will, of course, deny it, but we wanted you to be aware. I thanked her, hung up, and sat perfectly still. I could see the binder on the table, open to the section labeled Bank. I wrote, attempted address change, unauthorized, denied by bank. Each word steadied me even as my hands trembled. By the time the sun slid behind the trees, I thought the day had delivered its quota. Then came the voicemail from my insurance company. The agent's tone was cautious. Ms. Morgan, we received documentation requesting a transfer of your homeowner's policy to another primary, insured your brother, Evan. The paperwork included your name, but the signature did not match digital records. Our system flagged the discrepancy and the request has been rejected. We'll need to confirm with you directly to secure your account. I pressed replay. Once, twice, 3 times, letting the words burrow into certainty. They had faked my signature, not just copied my keys or hijacked my reputation online. They had tried to move legal ownership, to edge me out of the very structure I had bled for. I placed the call back immediately, confirmed every security question, and locked down the account. When the agent apologized for the inconvenience, I almost laughed. Inconvenience was what you called a wrong delivery or a late train. This was attempted theft wearing my name. After the call ended, I turned to the mirror across the room. My reflection was pale but steady. The shock hadn't melted into panic. It had cooled into something denser, something solid. They've crossed the line, I said aloud. My voice didn't shake. I printed the email from the HOA, the note from the bank, and the transcript of the insurance voicemail. I slid each into its own sleeve, labeled in bold ink. Fraud attempt. Adder change. Fraud attempt. Signature. The binder was no longer just a defense file. It was a record of crimes. For the first time, I imagined a courtroom, not as a fantasy of revenge, but as a practical destination. If they were willing to forge, to impersonate, to manipulate entire institutions, they would not stop voluntarily. The binder was becoming more than a shield. It was a weapon. I set it on the counter, placed my hand on its cover, and whispered, "This isn't fear anymore, it's evidence." Then I walked the house, one lock at a time, hearing each bolt click into place, no longer as a symbol of isolation, but as the punctuation of resolve. Tonight their reach ended at my door, and tomorrow I would make sure it ended on paper too. After the insurance call, I knew the binder wasn't enough. Documentation proved the pattern, but it didn't stop the next attempt. I needed a barrier they couldn't pretend not to see. That was when I called Dave. We'd met in college when I was tallying rent checks on the mantle while Evan's tuition was already wired in full. Dave had gone into family law, steady and meticulous, with the kind of patience that unnerved opponents. I sent him a message. I need legal protection. Not later. Now. He met me at his office the next afternoon, a quiet space lined with shelves, blinds half drawn, I carried the binder like a child. He opened it, flipped through each section, and nodded without comment. When he reached the page about the forged signature, his jaw tightened. "This is exactly why I tell clients," he said, sliding a fresh pad across the desk. "Document, don't engage. They want your outrage because it muddies the record. Evidence speaks better than anger." His pen scratched steadily. "We'll draft a cease and desist, formal notice, legally binding in tone. If they continue, the escalation favors you, not them. Think of this as planting a flag. Line drawn, crossed only at their risk." I sat back listening to the hum of the copier in the hall, the muffled voices of clerks. A strange relief settled in my chest, not because the fight was over, but because someone outside the family finally said, "You're not crazy. This is real." 2 hours later, Dave slid a thick envelope across the table. On the front, in bold red letters, the firm's stamp declared, "Legal notice." The weight of it was heavier than paper should be. He watched me place it into my bag like I was loading a weapon. "Do not mail this," he said. "Hand it directly. Let them see your face when they realize the rules have changed." The next morning, I drove to my parents' house. The air outside smelled of wet grass and gasoline, the lawn still trimmed to perfection. My mother opened the door, lips pressed into the same smile she used when greeting church visitors. Her eyes flicked to the envelope in my hand. "What's this?" she asked, reaching before I extended it. "A cease and desist," I said evenly. "From now on, no more forged documents, no more fake emergencies, no more harassment. Every action you take against me will be treated as legal misconduct. You've crossed the line. This is the boundary." Her hand froze an inch from the envelope. The smile cracked, voice dropping into something raw. "Tessa, you'll regret this. You don't turn on family without consequences." I placed the envelope firmly into her palm. "Then you'll regret underestimating me." For a long second, she just stared, envelope trembling against her fingers. Then she whispered, almost like a curse, "You will regret this." I stepped back, refusing to flinch. "Maybe, but I won't regret protecting myself." The door shut behind me, hard enough to rattle the glass. I walked to my car, each step steadier than the last. My phone buzzed before I reached the driver's seat, a new voicemail alert, no doubt already filled with her practiced outrage. I didn't listen, not yet. Back home, I opened the binder and created a new section, Legal Actions. I slid a copy of the notice into the sleeve and wrote the date in sharp ink. For the first time, the binder didn't just look like defense, it looked like armor. That night, I slept without jolting awake at every sound outside. The locks still clicked, the shadows still stretched across the walls, but for once, they weren't signs of threat. They were punctuation marks, closing sentences I had written myself. 2 days after I handed my mother the cease and desist, my doorbell chimed. The camera showed her on the stoop with a pie balanced in both hands. The lattice gleamed red. Cherry. Evan's favorite, not mine. I opened the door halfway and left the chain set. "Tessa," she said, "I baked." Thought we could talk like grown-ups. I unlatched the chain. 5 minutes, I said. No speeches. She set the pie on the island and looked around, measuring what had changed since the locksmith fiasco. A manila envelope peeked from her purse, tabbed with neon flags. "I've been thinking," she said, sliding into that polished tone. "Our first approach was clumsy. Let's correct course. We found some lovely 5-bedroom options." She laid glossy listings across the stone. "You keep a small office. Evan and the kids take the primary." "I'm not relocating," I said. Her smile thinned. "If you're determined to be difficult, there are avenues. Your father spoke with a friend. Contesting ownership is possible. Judges look at total family contribution. You couldn't possibly have afforded this house without us." She waited for the sting to land. It didn't. I set my binder beside the pie. "I brought dessert," she said. "Not homework?" "This isn't homework," I said, opening to the front pocket. "It's memory that can't be edited." I fanned out copies, rent receipts from my college years with her initials on each envelope, utility transfers in my name during semesters I lived in their basement, bank statements showing my payments while Evan's tuition, car, and gas card were covered by them, the HOA letter confirming a complaint filed by a relative, the bank's note about an attempted address change, the insurance transcript flagging a forged signature. Her breath hitched. "This is petty. This is precise," I answered. "You suggested a court might weigh family contribution. Here's the ledger." She tapped the realtor sheets, trying to recover momentum. "Imagine holidays in a proper home. Space for children to play. Tradition. Your grandmother would approve." I let a small laugh slip. "Grandma also taught me to return what you borrow and to ask before you take. Tradition cuts 2 ways." Her eyes flashed. "You have become hard." "No," I said. "I have become clear." She lifted the pie tin as if weight could anchor the moment. "You love cherry." "I don't," I said. "I ate it because you insisted Evan's favorite was festive. I prefer apple." Then the voice sharpened. "Your stubbornness humiliates us. People already think you're ungrateful." "They can hold whatever opinion they like," I said. "What they aren't entitled to is my house, my time, or my signature." I slid a single page to the top. The cease and desist acknowledgement. "This remains in force. No more surprise visits. No more third-party calls. All communication by email." She stared at the red stamp. "And if we ignore it?" "Then the next envelope has a different heading." A muscle jumped in her jaw. She gathered the listings too fast, corners scraping the counter. "You are choosing strangers over your family." "I'm choosing boundaries," I said. "If the family won't live inside them, that choice belongs to you." She reached for the pie, hesitated, then left it where it sat. At the door, she paused. "You're going to be very alone, Tessa." "I'm not," I said, thinking of Marcy's note, Tara's texts, and Dave's steady pen. "I'm finally in company, I trust." She opened the door. "We're not finished," she whispered. "You are, if you keep crossing the line." She left without slamming. I wrote today's date on a sticky note and pressed it to the plastic lid, then slid another copy of the notice into the binder's legal tab. I brewed tea and cut a slice of cherry for politeness, tasted the gloss, and set the plate aside. In the window's reflection, I saw a woman holding a spine made of paper and ink. I didn't feel hard. I felt steady. The kettle clicked off. I closed the binder and let the house settle around me. Then I carried the pie next door and left it for Mrs. Talbot with a note. "For your kindness. I prefer apple." The invitation arrived as a group text. "Family meeting. Sunday. 5 o'clock. I knew what that meant. An audience gathered to shame me back into line. I packed my binder and drove there. Anyway, if they wanted a performance, I would bring the script they refused to read. Their living room had been rearranged like a hearing room, folding chairs in rows. The coffee table cleared. My grandmother sat in the center of the couch, small and formal in her blue sweater. Aunts, uncles, cousins circled like satellites. My parents flanked Evan on the far side, arms folded, faces composed. No small talk. My father stood first. "We're here," he said, "to address the division Tessa has created." Murmurs of agreement moved around the room. I heard the rustle of paper in my mother's lap. Beside her, Evan's jaw worked. I didn't sit. "Before any speeches," I said, "I need everyone to see the facts." I set my binder on the coffee table and opened it to the tab labeled Doorbell. "This is my front camera, time-stamped the week I moved in." I pressed play. On my tablet screen, my mother appeared on my stoop, testing one key, then another, looking over her shoulder before signaling a locksmith to kneel. Evan hovered behind her while the children peered past his arm. Gasps rippled. I advanced the clip to the moment the locksmith stood up and backed away when I confronted him. Aunt Carol leaned forward. "Margaret, is that you calling a locksmith?" My mother lifted her chin. "We were helping. She changed the locks." I flipped to insurance and slid out a transcript. Then there's this. My insurer received paperwork attempting to transfer my policy's primary insured to Evan. The signature claimed to be mine. It wasn't. I set the printout on the table. They rejected it. Evan bristled. We don't even know who sent that. It came from your parents' address, I said, meeting his eyes. I turned a page. Bank notices. An attempted address change for my mortgage statements. Denied due to a mismatched signature. The representative called to confirm and logged the request. Uncle Thomas frowned. That's fraud, son. I opened the social tab. Screenshots spread across the coffee table. My face on the GoFundMe. The caption accusing me of denying bedrooms, donors I knew from church and school. They used my photo without permission, I said. The platform took the page down. My grandmother's hands trembled in her lap. Why would anyone do that? She asked the room. Not me. I added the comparison sheet last. My rent receipts from college stacked against line items for Evan's tuition, car, and gas card. Columns of numbers like tracks in fresh snow. Since everyone is so interested in family contribution, here is mine. Silence tightened. A chair creaked. Cousin Mike shifted, eyes moving between the printouts and my parents, like a juror realizing the verdict had written itself. Even the kids in the hallway went quiet, sensing that grown-ups had crossed a boundary they couldn't defend. My father broke first. Tessa is twisting ordinary family matters into crimes. We helped her for years. Now she's paying us back with humiliation. I kept my voice level. All I've done is draw a line and record what happens when you step over it. Evan slapped his knee. She's alone in a 3-bedroom while my kids sleep on a couch. What kind of aunt is proud of that? A responsible one, I said, who refuses to teach them that other people's doors are theirs to open. Aunt Carol turned from the screen to my mother. Did you really call a locksmith, Margaret? Did you really submit those forms? My mother's lips pressed thin. We were trying to solve a problem she created. Grandma covered her mouth with one hand. Tears gathered, bright and sudden. I raised you to ask before you take, she whispered. I raised you to tell the truth? The room's temperature dropped. The air felt like glass. I closed the binder. I don't need apologies, I said. I need compliance. From now on, any contact about housing is by email. Any attempt to impersonate me, to alter my accounts, to shame me through the community will be met with legal action. I've already issued a cease and desist. Uncle Thomas nodded once. Seems fair. My father scanned the faces. So we're just going to abandon Evan's children? Is that what you all want on your conscience? No one is abandoning anyone, I said. You can support your son without stealing from your daughter. Evan stood, flushed. You're running away. I'm standing still, I answered. For the first time in my life. Grandma dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Enough, she said softly. Enough of this taking. A quiet settled that wasn't the old variety of pressure. It was the end of a sound that had played too long. Power slipped off their shoulders and landed where it belonged. No one moved to lift it. I gathered my binder and looked around the room. I have nothing else to add. On my way to the door, my mother's voice followed me, small and bitter. You will regret this, Tessa. Maybe, I said without turning. But I will not regret telling the truth. I stepped into evening air. Behind me, the house held its breath around a new shape of silence. I didn't wait for another ambush. The morning after the tribunal, I composed a single email to my parents, Evan, and the relatives who had sat in those folding chairs. The message was short and plain. I was listing my house this week and had accepted a management position in another city starting next month. I added 2 lines about forwarding addresses and the rule that all communication would be by email. Then I hit send and closed the laptop. Tara, my realtor, arrived that afternoon with a photographer. We walked room to room in a quiet choreography, opening blinds, straightening throws, tucking cords out of sight. The camera clicked like a metronome. When the photographer left, Tara studied me. "You sure?" she asked. I nodded. "This isn't retreat," I said. "It's direction." The listing went live at noon the next day. By 3, my mother's car idled at the curb. Evan climbed out behind her, red-faced. They didn't knock, only stared through the window. I stepped onto the porch and shut the door behind me. "You can't sell," my mother said. "This is a family matter. You'll make us look heartless." Evan cut in, louder. "Where are the kids supposed to sleep, Tessa?" "On the floor? Our lease is month to month. You're stranding us." I kept my voice even. "You're parents, Evan. Your children need parents who take responsibility, not a sister whose name is on a deed." Aunt Carol turned the corner from Mrs. Talbot's walkway, a tote over her shoulder. She stopped at the bottom step and looked straight at Evan. "The kids need parents who take responsibility, not your sister." My mother's mouth pinched. "You would side with an outsider against your own?" "I'm siding with the truth," Aunt Carol said. "We all saw the videos, we saw the forms." Evan threw up his hands. "So that's it? She ruins our plan and rides out of town?" "I'm not riding anywhere," I said. "I'm moving toward work that fits me and a life you can't enter with a copied key." "People will talk," my mother warned. "They already are," Aunt Carol replied. "Let them talk about boundaries." The porch fell quiet except for a wind chime down the street. I felt a lightness I'd been chasing for years. "I'll send you the forwarding address," I said. "There's nothing else to discuss." Evan tried once more. "At least leave the garage opener. I need somewhere to park until we figure things out." I shook my head. "No." They left without another word. I stood there until the car turned the corner, then went back inside and locked the door. The click felt final, without feeling cruel. That evening, Tara called with an offer over asking. I accepted. After we hung up, I walked through each room and thanked it for what it had given me. Proof that I could build something on my own and keep it safe long enough to learn I didn't have to guard it forever. I boxed the last of the kitchen and set aside what I would donate. On the counter sat the cherry pie tin I'd never returned. I washed it, dried it, and left it on my parents' porch after dark with a note that said only, "Return to owner." Then I drove home and slept through the night. In the morning, sunlight slid across the floor in clean bands. I placed my keys on the hook, traced the single brass tooth with my thumb, and smiled. Selling wasn't defeat. It was a sentence with a period instead of an ellipsis. The house smelled faintly of cardboard and dust, the scent that clings when you begin to box up a life. I lined the dining room with stacks of folded cartons, tape dispenser ready, Sharpie uncapped. Into one box went books I'd read under the dim light of the bay window. Into another, framed receipts and records, the binder that had carried me from silence into clarity. Halfway through, labeling a carton, "Kitchen Fragile," my phone buzzed. Tara, my realtor, sent a short message. Offer finalized. 15,000 over asking, closing in 30 days. I leaned against the counter and let the numbers settle like sunlight. Proof not only that the house was mine, but that my decision to leave carried value the others could never claim. By Saturday, the driveway filled with familiar cars. Marcy arrived first, arms full of bubble wrap and muffins. "Bribes for the workers," she said, already taping a box. Behind her came Sophia from down the block, sleeves rolled to her elbows, and then 2 co-workers balancing a cooler between them. Laughter spilled in before the screen door closed. The living room transformed into a hive. Someone blasted old pop songs from a phone. Someone else unearthed a forgotten board game from under the couch and declared it a treasure. I watched them move in easy rhythm, labeling, lifting, carrying, joking. There was no entitlement, no manipulation, just help freely given. For the first time, I felt what it meant to have a family of choice. Marcy caught me standing still and nudged my shoulder. "Don't get sentimental yet. We still need to tackle the kitchen." I smiled, picked up the tape, and joined her. The rhythm of fold, fill, seal became almost meditative. Each strip of tape sounded like punctuation, marking the end of one chapter and the start of another. Late afternoon, as the boxes stacked waist high, my phone chimed again. A message from an unknown number. "Tessa, this is Cousin Brenda." I heard what happened at the meeting. I'm sorry I stayed quiet. You were right. Some of us have lived in that shadow too. I hope your new place gives you peace. I read it twice, then a third time, feeling the edges of tears press behind my eyes. It wasn't a grand reconciliation, but it was something, an ember of honesty flickering where silence had always been. I saved the message, labeled it with the date, then slid the phone back into my pocket. When evening came, we ordered pizza and sat cross-legged on the floor among the towers of boxes. The air was warm with garlic and laughter. Someone raised a glass of soda and toasted, "To new keys and locked doors that open only when you say so." Everyone clinked bottles, and the cheer rang brighter than any family gathering I'd ever endured. As the last slice disappeared, the house looked different. Empty walls reflected a softer light, but instead of loss, I felt relief. Tomorrow I'd pack the last essentials. Soon I'd drive toward a new job, a new city, a space untouched by copied keys or forged papers. Before bed, I walked to the front door. The lock turned with a crisp click beneath my fingers. I whispered, "Mine," until the very last day, and let the quiet answer back. 1 year later, my mornings begin with light spilling across a small kitchen I chose for myself. The walls are a calm eggshell, the counters simple maple, and outside the window a ribbon of wildflowers leans toward the sun, black-eyed Susans, purple coneflower, and shy alyssum that refuses to quit. By the door hangs a plain wooden hook with a single brass key. No spares, no hidden copies. When I lift it, the metal is warm from the house's quiet breath. I slide an apple pie from the oven and listen to the crust settle. A hush like applause. Friends filter in with easy laughter. Marcy balancing paper plates, Sophia with whipped cream, and 2 co-workers carrying sparkling water and a bouquet tied with twine. We set the pie on the table I sanded myself, and for the first time in years, I eat exactly what I love, without calling it festive for someone else. Cinnamon blooms in the air. The room feels honest. Conversation meanders. Gardens that survive the heat, a trail I hike at sunrise, the promotion that arrived with a note from my boss. "For your steadiness." We talk about ordinary things, the kind that never made the old group chats because they weren't leverage. Someone asks about the door camera. I smile and point to the tiny green light above the frame. It's quieter here. It doesn't record ambushes, mostly it collects porch sunsets and the mail carrier's wave. After dessert, I take a small box from a drawer. Inside rests a single photograph from another life. My family packed around a grill, everyone pressed close, my smile tilting away from center. I hold it by the corners, then set it beside a new picture. The front door of this house painted a confident red. A callback, I tell myself. An answer to the gouged brass I once traced with shaking fingers. I breathe in, out, then delete the old image from my phone. The frame on the shelf receives the red door. The hook by the entry holds 1 key. When I turn the new lock, it gives a soft, clean click, the kind of silence that isn't empty, but safe. The house settles. I keep my hand on the knob a moment longer, feeling how far stillness can carry. Later, while we stack plates and rinse glasses, Marcy nudges me. "You look lighter," she says. I smile. It's true. The binder that once lived on my table now rests in a drawer, not because the past vanished, but because memory can be quiet when no one is trying to rewrite it. My garden needs watering. My inbox holds work and invitations, not subpoenas in disguise. When night drifts in, I step onto the porch with tea. Crickets stitch their bright music through the grass. I think of what I wish I'd known sooner. You can love people and still lock your door. You can forgive and still document. You can leave without running. We don't get to choose where we begin. I whisper into the dark, but we can choose where we stop and where we start again. My grandmother would say, "Chung ta hong chon juoch noi bat jiao, nhung ta ko the chon noi dong lai, Va bat jau lai. Before we say goodbye, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee, or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, consider subscribing. Not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Wherever you are, I hope you carry this story with you. And remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock on your door. It waits quietly until you're ready to open your heart. Finally, one last image. My hand lifting that single key, the camera edging close as the teeth slide into the new lock. The turn is steady. The click is soft. The frame holds the stillness. Safety doesn't shout. It simply rests, listening.